How's everybody doing today?
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I usually like to tell a little bit about my story. Kind of helps you frame how I look at the world and how I want to look at tackling. Houston Gaines, thank you. You've been an incredible partner, and that man back there has given me a lot of the tools to fix a very troubled agency in the insurance department of Georgia. So I'm always grateful to say hi and thank him for everything he's done for us. First of all, what I like to explain is the funny accent. Everybody's kind of scratching your heads and like, man, this guy does not sound like he's from Willacoochee, Georgia. And my father's from Nashville, Georgia, Berrien County. He grew up in a tobacco farm. Did not like working in a tobacco farm as a young man. So as World War II was getting ready to start, he ran off to Savannah, Georgia and joined the Merchant Marine. Sailed during the war, sailed all over. He got sunk 5 times on the Atlantic Ocean by German U-boats. Of course, me being a smart aleck, teenager, I said, Dad, you weren't very good at this. You got sunk a lot. But he continued working after the war as a Merchant Marine sailor and went to live in, So I didn't, as you can tell by my accent, a lot of people think I'm Cajun. They think I'm from all over the world. And it's funny because Georgians, when they can't tell where you're from, they automatically default, you must be from New Jersey. I don't know what is it about New Jersey, but definitely not from New Jersey. My father continued working for the Merchant Marine and went to live in Mexico and married my mom. So what you hear is Spanish and Southern rolled together. So I grew up in Mexico for the first 17 years of my life. My father wanted me to learn how to speak English. And so brought me to the United States and brought me of all places to Albany, Georgia. Oh. Which made my accent even more pronounced in Southern and Spanish. And I graduated from Albany High and went to Atlanta to go to Georgia State University. I couldn't come to the big metropolis of Athens. And so I went to Georgia State University, and to help me pay for college, I joined the Atlanta Police Department. So I started my career as an Atlanta police officer. My first assignment was walking high crime foot patrol on Auburn Avenue at night. It was a little sporty on Auburn Avenue at night. But I used to walk Coretta Scott King to her car every night. And because I grew up in Mexico, I did not realize what a big deal that was. And she was incredibly kind. If anybody should have had a hard time with a young, blonde-headed, blue-eyed cop, should have been Coretta. Absolutely not. Share with me some of the values, some of the things that I took to heart. Like, it wasn't the chief of police's job to make sure that the neighborhood was safe at night. It was my job, and my job only. Everybody else could help, but it was my job and it's my responsibility to make sure that community was safe. And so I worked for the Atlanta Police Department. Of course, I think God thought I was going to get involved in insurance sometime during my life, because everything that could happen to a young cop happened to me. I was shot in line of duty. I was stabbed. I was run over by a police car. So I took full benefit of the workers' comp insurance program for the city of Atlanta. But I fell in love with the idea of serving. I was one of the original Red Dog officers when the Atlanta Police started the Red Dog Squad. We would ride 4 officers to a car. Why? Because crack cocaine had just hit the streets of Atlanta, and Atlanta was desperate to come up with a solution. Because there was neighborhoods where police could not go by themselves. In our assignment, we would ride 4 to a car, and we were told, don't leave that neighborhood until the problem is solved. You stay there until the problem is solved. And our job was to solve problems, to make sure we identified who belonged in the community, who did not belong in the community, and make sure that we protected our community. And it was a tough assignment, but incredibly rewarding. I also joined the Georgia Army National Guard as a young soldier. Why? Because I saw this commercial, this tank running through the woods, knocking trees down and going through mud holes. And I said, man, I can never get insurance to cover that kind of damage, but I'm sure the United States Army will do that. So I fell in love with the idea of serving my nation, my state. I started as a private. And I just retired 3 years ago as a major general. And guys, I appreciate that. But the reason I'm telling you that is that no other country in the world would allow that opportunity. Nowhere. Not even the country I was born in. You couldn't go from private to major general. You know, serving alongside your sons and daughters in all the conflicts. I mean, it started with Desert Storm, Bosnia, Iraq, Afghanistan. I've had the privilege of leading your sons and daughters in some incredibly tough spots in the world. And so that again reinforced my desire and my passion for service, because I've been so fortunate to serve with America's best. And I'm in debt to this young generation of young men and women who are continuing to serve, knowing that they're going to deploy, knowing that they're going to serve in conflict zones. We also have an obligation to do a better job for them once we bring them back home. And we'll talk a little bit about that. I worked for the Atlanta Police Department for 7.5 years. I had some incredible assignments. Because I speak Spanish, my job was also, I got rented off to the DEA for a little while to be a task force agent as a local cop. So I worked as a Drug Enforcement Administration task force agent. And then I went to work at Doraville, one of the most diverse communities in Georgia. 17 languages spoken on the streets of Doraville, Buford Highway. And so when Athens, brother, when y'all talk about recruiting and retention challenges, you don't even know what recruiting and retention challenges. Trying to find somebody that can speak Mandarin or Vietnamese or Korean, because culture matters. And the folks that come to those communities have a desire to be, they're incredible Americans. They come to this nation, they follow the rules, they want to, and so they're wonderful folks that love America. And they want to give back for that opportunity. And so I went through the ranks. I became the chief of police of Doraville. And so I was the chief of police for 14 years. Then Governor Kemp came into office, and I applied to be the head of the Georgia National Guard, the adjutant general. And my best friend got the job. Tommy Carter is an incredible general officer that I've known since we were second lieutenants together. He now is going up for 4-star. He's going through his Senate confirmation process to be a 4-star general. Incredibly proud of him. Georgia born, Georgia raised. And so we are producing some incredible leaders for this nation. Well, I applied to be the head of the National Guard, and the governor chose Tommy. So I went back to serving as chief of police in Doraville, and I went back to being a general assigned to Army North. In 2017, I was the first commanding general that commanded the troops on the border. 2017, from San Diego, California to McAllen, Texas. The Army wanted somebody who could speak Spanish, somebody that had a relationship with the Mexican military to make sure that both countries were protecting that border. And we were able to turn that operation around in less than 30 days. That's what happens when you have somebody that's leading. And so, and it was not just, the credit goes to President Trump in his outlook on how to get negotiations between two countries to get the outcomes that we need. Well, I applied to be, so the governor called me a month afterwards, after he told me that Tommy was going to become the adjutant general, and asked me, John, I'd like you to be the insurance commissioner. I'm like, Governor, I don't know anything about insurance. I mean, what you see in front of you is what you get. You get a cop, you get a soldier. Plain spoken, I mean, that's how I was raised. And so the governor was ready for that. The governor said, well, we've had a lot of people that know a lot about insurance. It hasn't quite worked out really well for Georgia. Unfortunately, we have now the distinction of having 2 insurance commissioners in federal prison. And so, the bar is pretty low. Although you don't never have to worry about me ever doing anything stupid, because I'm married to a policewoman. And I will tell you that they probably would never find my body if I do something really dumb, right? She's a very tough gal. She retired from Cobb County Police Department as a lieutenant and lasted 1 year, retired. She says, I'm bored. I'm going to go back to work. So now she works as a fraud investigator part-time for the Sandy Springs Police Department. That's truly the only person in this world that I'm truly afraid of. I have to admit to you, I am terrified of that woman. She shoots better than I do, so she keeps me with my feet planted on the ground. And so I became your insurance commissioner almost 6.5 years ago. An agency that was totally out of control, adrift. And we revamped it. We're now one of the best agencies, thanks to Houston Gaines and their investment in giving us the budget and the authorities that we could use to reform this agency. But we're now one of the best agencies in the state. And of course, every commissioner is going to tell you that they have the best. I can prove it because I have people quitting other agencies to come and work for us for the same salary. It's about culture. It's about making sure that our compass is pointed north and that we're doing things ethically and morally. And the customer is the consumer and the citizens of Georgia, not the bureaucracy. I'm interested in outcomes. And that is why, we've been focused on doing, and honestly, I am finding a new sense of energy because we're getting things done. We've been able to pull Georgia out of the ACA, out of Obamacare, and started our own marketplace in Georgia called Georgia Access. We've been able to sign up 1.5 million Georgians for affordable private health insurance. Of course, the opposition party is never going to tell you that. We've been successful in getting people to sign up because the private market is going to be always far superior than a government-run program. And by the way, we're not going to the taxpayers and asking you for more money to run this program. The program runs itself. And so we've been very successful there. And, then comes this situation with the Senate. I will tell you, folks, I'm an Afghan veteran. I served in Afghanistan for 13 months. My son also served in Afghanistan. 2 generations of my family served in Afghanistan. So this is kind of personal. I was kept safe by Afghans, not by Americans. I was assigned to the Ministry of Interior of Afghanistan. The Afghans kept me alive for 13 months in some pretty sporty parts of Afghanistan. I traveled to 30 out of the 34 provinces throughout Afghanistan. Probably no other American traveled as much as I did with Afghans, not with Americans. The fact that I had to have a special thing sewn into the back of my belt with $200 in a map and in words in every language, that if I'm captured, please bring me to the nearest, or bring my remains to the nearest American base, that tells you that I was out there flapping in the wind many a times by myself and my interpreter. So, Afghans kept me alive. And the way we left that country was disastrous. Yes. It sowed the seeds for almost every conflict that we're seeing today. I'm convinced that Ukraine is a byproduct of our weakness in Afghanistan. And I will tell you that emboldened Iran to do October 7th in Israel. I think the perception of weakness in America, we lost our way. Oh, by the way, we promised those allies that served with us, the Brits, the French, the Germans, that we would not leave them in the middle of the night, and that's exactly what we did. As an American, soldier, as an American fighting man, to me it was disgraceful how we did this. I started getting messages from my Afghan partners on Telegram and on WhatsApp. Can you help get me out? And so I went to our 2 senators. I went to John Ossoff and I went to Raphael Warnock and called them and asked them for help. They ignored my call. I had to go and embarrass them on Atlanta TV before John Ossoff's office then called. By then it was too late. The last message that I got from my Afghan partners is, I know you can't get me out, but can you at least get my daughters out? Guys, I'm a father of a young woman. That message still crushes me. And so that's when I knew we had a fundamental problem with the people who wanted to represent Georgia in the Senate. And so I went to talk to the governor. I said, Governor, I hope you run. You need to run because you can beat John Ossoff's hands down. I'm not sure you're going to do it, but if you don't run, I'm thinking seriously putting my name in the hat. Because it's going to take somebody with my background, my kind of credentials, of performance, not getting in front of a TV camera, not doing cutesy, tweeting. It's about performance. It's about outcomes. And that's what's going to take to defeat him. And it's going to take, this is going to be hard, guys. He's sitting on, he is running against President Trump. He's not worried about any Georgian right now. His platform is just be an obstacle to anything that's going on in this country today. The fact that he can't bring himself to know the difference of boys playing and girls sports.
That's right.
Again, I could care less what you do in the privacy of your own home. You can swing off the ceiling fan if you want to. God bless you. But I don't want my daughter ever being injured, trying to compete in a sport and losing out to a scholarship to a young man. I'm sorry. But that's just the way I'm wired. I guess you could say I'm old school. Try to block the sale of defensive munitions for Israel to protect themselves. Guys, I am a product of the Georgia-Israeli law enforcement exchange. I went and trained with the Israeli police, and I also hosted Israeli policemen in Doroville when I was the chief of police. They're an incredibly diverse community. Not everybody there is Jewish. There's Christians, there's Muslim, Israelis. They have this zest and they love life. And they're the only country in that region that everybody wants to do away with. Don't get me wrong. I don't think there's any place or room for American service members to be on the ground there. There's no need to do that. We need to continue to support them, at least so they can defend themselves. We owe that to that country. But apparently John Ossoff doesn't think that that's the role for America. Right now, everybody's running, on this whole, on shooting at the big beautiful bill. What is the big beautiful bill? It brings us back to our, the foundations of what is common. It makes common sense. No taxes on tips. I'm good with that. No taxes on overtime. Reasonable. If you're an able-bodied adult, you should not get free health care unless you work for it. Right. You had to work for it. But these folks want to have everybody emboldened and hooked on the government dime. The idea that we provide, don't get me wrong, I have an incredible heart for people that can't help themselves. And there's a place for Medicare and Medicaid to do that. But if you are able-bodied, no, we're not going to provide you health care to sit at home and watch TV.
That's right.
You need to do your job. You need to at least go try to find a job or go to school or do something to, the idea of generations and generations of just being on the welfare dime is not sustainable. We can't afford the size of the government. The things that I'm passionate about, obviously, is veterans. I am responsible for the kids that I lost in combat. That's a debt I can never repay back to those families. I'm responsible for making sure that those families are taken care of. And I'm also responsible for the kids that I brought back wounded. 87 Georgians that we brought back that are hurt. And we have a responsibility to give them absolutely the best health care. Now, I will tell you, Doug Hollins is doing a fantastic job trying to reform the VA. But the VA is a freaking mess. I mean, we got, I used to drive by Claremont Road, VA hospital. One of the worst hospitals in the East Coast. Their performance is dismal. I'm having veterans having to drive from Rome, Georgia, to go all the way down to Claremont Road in Decatur, and then be told, I'm sorry, we don't have a practitioner for you today. You got to wait 6 more months. Horrible hospital, horrible outcomes. Sitting next to one of the best hospitals in America, Emory University Hospital. So why is the government competing against private health system for the care of our veterans? And so my proposal is we ought to transition the VA into an insurance company. Pay the bill. Let our veterans be taken care of closest to their homes where we can measure outcomes. The problem is the federal government, a lot of governments right now, and I will tell you, probably Athens is a little bit like this. They measure their performance about how much money they put into a program, not how successful the program is.
That's right.
In the Army, we call it a self-licking ice cream cone. The problem is if we don't measure outcomes, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
And we cannot afford, I mean, folks, we're spending $1 trillion on national defense. As a retired general, I know we're not getting $1 trillion worth of defense value today. We're spending a lot. And defense is just an example because I know the most out of it. But there's so much fraud, waste, and abuse has been identified. And it's been going on for years. And the folks that we sent to Washington have not been serious about this.
Yes, that's right.
And folks, I care about outcomes. You're not going to, and so that's my passion about why I want to go and represent. I wish I would have, Brian Kemp would have decided to go to Washington, but I understand why he does. It's hard to go as a governor then to join a club of 100, and folks are not really interested in getting things done. I think folks spend too much time in Washington, and they're starting to fall in love with themselves, looking at themselves on a TV screen. And they're probably not married to a mean policewoman like I am. And so that is the things that they're driving me. This was not easy, guys. The governor. I ran with the governor in the last election. I was the second highest vote getter, and I ran statewide. I did all the commercials for the governor in Spanish. And so we were able to move Hispanic voters from 23% to the Republican Party to 44%. And folks, we didn't do what Democrats do. We didn't go and pander to Hispanic voters. We told them the same things that are important to you about public safety, clean neighborhoods, road conditions, getting the government out of their lives as much as we can. And the other side wants to bring Lin-Manuel Miranda from New York to talk to Hispanic voters in Gainesville. And they looked at him like, who is this guy? First of all, his Spanish was horrible, so that's a whole different story. But Hispanic voters don't need to be pandered to. They're here, they've escaped, and they've gotten away from horrible socialist governments. Many of the Nicaraguans and Venezuelans tell me, says, we got to save America because there's nowhere else for us to go to. We're running out of places to go. And we got to fight to make sure that we keep America the land of opportunity. The land has given me the opportunity to be here, to be a chief of police, a retired 2-star general, and your insurance commissioner. And so with that, I like to pause and take your questions, because every time I come and chat with folks, you make me a better, more effective, clear communicator about the things that are important. And folks, I'm not a Democrat, so nothing is off the table. All right? Please. Yes.
I don't know if I can elucidate my question right, but do you watch Steve Bannon? Do you listen to Marjorie Taylor Greene?
Sometimes, yes.
There's a bit of a split on the Israel issue.
Yeah, I know.
So I just want to let you know that
I know that.
I
And I respect that. I'm not from the world that says, you're wrong, the world is more, I've spent time in the region. I've been shot at in that region. I've carried a rifle, an American rifle in that region. But I know that if President Trump was incredibly courageous on being able, because he's the first president that actually took action against Iran, of going and taking the nuclear option off the table. Now this part of the world, for the first time in modern history, has really an opportunity to have a serious discussion about peace. They've been the instigators of insecurity in that region for years. And believe me, I'm biased. And I'll clearly tell you I'm biased. The Iranians caused the death of some of my soldiers, the incredible injuries, some of my soldiers in Iraq. They're responsible. And so, I hold a grudge. I'm sorry, I'm a human being. These kids that they hurt, my soldiers, I'm responsible, and they don't get a pass. And so the Israelis are very competent in dealing with their challenges. It is, and I appreciate the fact that President Trump is trying to get people to negotiate because he's tired of the bloodshed of all sides. But doing what other administrations have done and just talked about it is not causing more people to lose their life. And it's tiring to see all these human lives being killed for nothing. I mean, they don't have anything to speak in. And so I'm glad that finally you got a president that did something meaningful. I will tell you, commerce is going to be the way to solve a lot of these challenges, both positive and negative pressures. It's not the mighty, the American military is, how many people from the Air Force here? All right. I hate to say anything really good about the Air Force as an Army guy, but the incredible capacity of folks launching out of Missouri, refueling multiple times in the middle of the night over the Atlantic Ocean, and then dropping major big old bombs down an air conditioning shaft. Nobody in the world can do that. Not the Chinese, not the Russians, nobody can do that. But you know what? He took action to at least take the nuclear threat out of now for once, they actually have a chance. The alternative is just sitting back and being upset every time a catastrophe or something horrible happens. And I'm tired of having this story repeat itself over and over and over again. We need to disrupt that. Or else we're going to be talking about this with my grandchild. I have 2 grandchildren, so my job is not to spoil my grandchildren and get revenge against my son. Mountain Dew and chocolate will do it every time. I understand that.
It wasn't really to be opposite to you.
No. But I understand. A lot of people. I will tell you, in no part of my thought process plays the part that we need to put American soldiers anywhere near that area. We will actually screw it up if we put American soldiers on the ground. We don't need to do that. We just needed to take the biggest thing off the table is the nuclear threat. I hope that made sense. No, I appreciate you bringing that up because it's something that everybody's talking about. Any other thoughts? Yes, ma'am. Camera lady.
As a military man, how do you plan to deal with the judicial warfare that President Trump is having to deal with?
I don't know if there's much of a room for the military. We come from a country of rules, and President Trump has been pretty good in the court. He's done. I mean, you know what? I started as a policeman. We all work for somebody else. Any decision we don't like in the courts can get appealed. The challenge that President Trump has got is he has very little time. And they're trying to run the clock on him.
Yes.
This is a president that is a transformational leader that we desperately need to change the way that the federal government sees the relationship with the states. I will tell you, if I go to Washington, I'm going to be trying to, my first question is, can the state do this better? Let's give them a block grant so Houston Gaines can figure out how to take care of Athens, Georgia, because they can do it a hell of a lot better than somebody in Washington, D.C. This is what we did when we pulled out of Obamacare, and we created our own market. And guess what? We got people signed up for private health insurance, which will always beat government-run insurance every day of the week.
Yes.
And of course, it deals with it, and so a lot of, you're going to hear, oh, look at all these people that are going to lose health care. Yeah, if you're an able-bodied person and you're fit to work, yeah, you don't need to be going into your pocket to provide that health care for free. And if you're here illegally, I'm sorry. In Mexico, it's funny because in Mexico, I grew up in Mexico, so I know a lot about Mexican law. There's 1 million Americans living in Mexico today. To be allowed to live in Mexico as an American citizen, you got to pay for your own health insurance. You cannot compete and take a job from a Mexican citizen. And if you do any of those, out you go. Oh, by the way, elections, you have to have a special ID card besides your driver's license with your fingerprint and your iris. They take biometrics now before you can vote.
Wow.
I don't know if you would call it, I don't know if you could call it Jim Crow. I don't know how to, Hyman Crow 2.0, I don't know. But that's how serious elections are. But if you're an American citizen living in overseas, you got to respect the laws. And you know what? And there will be a time, once we can deal with the abuses of the previous administration, and I mean, I will tell you, in Doraville, the victims of crime were MS-13 and Tren de Aragua. They went and targeted the Hispanic community. They targeted them worse than anybody. They were the first victims, and they wreaked havoc in my community, and they wreaked havoc to this community.
That's right.
And so it's a sense of accountability. And you know what? And the problem when you have young military-age males just living in hotels, getting paid, they go, you know, they run, they go nutty. So, yeah. So we got to correct that before we can start addressing. And you know, and I got a couple of thoughts on you know, a lot of people talk about immigration. Both sides have talked about immigration as all or nothing. The world is more complicated than that. There's a lot of people that that there's jobs in America. And people need to have access to jobs. That doesn't mean that you become a citizen. There's a lot of programs all over the world where you can you got to be vetted, you got to be law-abiding, you got to pay taxes, you can't be a burden in your community, and then you can come and do seasonal work and then go return to your country and not drag your family and become a burden on our schools and our hospitals. But there's a way to do it. But when you flood America with 17, 18 million people who nobody knows who they are, we got a major problem. And so, you know, not everybody needs to be citizen, and we need to get the absolute very best of the world that wants to be citizen. But they got to do it in an orderly fashion. And how about immigration? It's got to be lawful. It cannot be the nightmare that we had for the last administration. I mean, wrecked us. And it showed up in our hospitals, in our schools, and it put a burden. And the problem is that every community has to pay for that. And so, of course, and there's always a victim. And who speaks on behalf of the countless victims? Everybody wants to always talk about, you know, these guys, and it's like, who talks to the victims? Their voices go, they're silenced. And I come from that world where we protect our community. That starts with that. I hope I answered your question. Yes, sir.
I have a lot of concern about the Marxist, socialist rhetoric that seems to appeal to so many young people.
Yeah. It's free.
Yes.
Come and get the flat screen TV. Come and get a free refrigerator. You want to know who really will tell you that they don't stand for that? Is somebody that wasn't born in this country. Because they know what that means. It is the beginning of the end of our society. I used to be here in Mexico. Folks would tell me, when you take something for free from the government, you're giving up something.
Yeah, that's right.
You're giving up a little bit of your freedom. You're giving a little bit of your soul. You're giving up a little bit of your future.
But how do you make the young people understand that?
Sometimes elections matter. And you got to go through the pain. New York is you're getting ready to have a bunch of New Yorkers moving to Athens, I'll tell you that, if the election goes the way it is. You've had a horrible experience in Athens. You know what wrong looks like. I mean, ran amok. But nobody's more of an optimist than a former Atlanta police officer. The sun will come out tomorrow, and there's another chance to succeed, but we can't give up. We can't throw our hands up in the air and say, well, I'm not going to vote. I'm not going to vote. Because, you know, we have to continue and stay in the fight. If we give up, they win. And we have to be passionate about that. And you know what? And we got to, and that's what primaries are for. So you can kick the tires and ask the hard questions. Because I'm asking for it. I'm filling out a job application. And you're my employer. And so don't fall for the shiny TV ad or the glossy, you know, the triple page glossy. Yeah, people can buy that. And you'll get tired of getting my job sooner or later. But you need to be able to get somebody to stand in front of you and you ask them the hard question. The key is we can't give up. A lot of kids fall in love with the flashy screen. But once I become my daughter got married and she just bought her first house. Like, man, there's a lot of paperwork. Man, there's a lot of taxes. Welcome to being a Republican. You know, but it takes that shock to the system. Our generation, it's easier for us because we have life. We got a little bit of gray hair. We know that we had harder times in the past, and we know what's at stake. And so we have to go and communicate, and you know, and every generation takes information differently. What worked with us is not going to work with this young generation. But we can't give up on them. Less than 1% of this generation is joining the military. We have areas around the nation that have no connection to somebody that serves in the military. We're blessed in the Southeast. More people in the Southeast join the military than any other part of America. And you know, when you go to the military and you get to serve with people that are not like you, they don't look like you, and you get to meet their families. And this is what I tell a lot of people in the Hispanic community: meet somebody that doesn't look like you. Go share a meal and talk to them about your family, your grandchildren, and the things that you want to do and you want to get. The Republican Party is in a great spot because we have to open up our tent. The margins in Georgia, we're 47% Republican state, 45% Democrat state. It's tight. And so how do we win elections? Suburban women, Hispanic voters, and veterans. Those are the margins, and it's a tiny margin. But if we can't make our case to those groups, we're not going to win elections. And candidate quality matters. At the end of the day, people want to say, can this person go to Washington and not lose their way?
Yes.
That's right. That's right.
Again, most of them are not married to a mean police woman. So. But I hope that we just can't give up, sir. Because it's easy to get frustrated. And you know what? Remember when you were a teenager, what the thoughts and things that you had that you thought were important, and how you're married, you had children and grandchildren, how much that changes. I will tell you.
When I was a teenager, I voted for Bo Calloway.
Well, there you go. I'll tell you, I never thought seriously about all my deployments, and I had multiple deployments. I'm still scratching my head what I was doing in Bosnia for 7 months of my life. Like, why am I here? And we ought to have people in Senate asking, why are we sending soldiers to any part of the world? What is the purpose? What is the task? And what is the criteria for success? And if we can't have those answers, I'll tell you, I didn't think about it when I was deploying. But when my son deployed, wait a second, this is not fun anymore. That was the most terrified year of my life, waiting on pins and needles about my son returning from Afghanistan. Then he was a Marine too, which made it even worse as an Army guy. And so we ought to ask those questions. And so this whole idea of using the military as a policeman of the world, we ought to be a little bit more judicious about it. And I'm glad we have a generation of veterans who are starting to say, hey, what are we trying to achieve?
Yep.
The worst thing we can do today is send soldiers to Ukraine and send soldiers to Israel or Iran. We don't need to do that. They need to fight for them. I've fought in enough countries. We've fought in enough countries where the country didn't want to be. They didn't want to be a country themselves. We can earn it for them. And so I'm all about supporting for them to fight, continue fighting. Russia should not get away with just steamrolling over another country. But we don't use our economy as a weapon. I mean, I'll tell you, I've told folks, if we just built the fence in Crimea and just said, all right, Russian, we're going to stop the conflict. We're not going to recognize you taking over Crimea, but as long as we stop the killing. And I'll tell you, all we have to do is build a Buc-ee's and a Walmart on the other side of the fence. Folks, that's how we crushed the Russians before. It's the economy, our way of life, our values, freedom. Dollar Tree, there you go. It's our economy, the opportunity of working and thriving and raising families that will always beat a socialist and a communist country. But we don't give ourselves enough credit to use that. We want to use the easy button, the military. Because it's easy, it's simple, and our military is disciplined. But I tell you, our economy is a much more powerful weapon that we can use. And our love for liberty.
Yep.
And so we don't give ourselves enough credit. And I think a lot of politicians just take it for granted. But why? Because they don't know the cost. There's always a cost. Every time we get a kid hurt, and I don't get me wrong, I'm not going to be avoiding. There's some fights that we have to fight, but we ought to be really, really judicious in our use of our military because it matters.
Yeah.
I hope I answered your question. I know I ran a mouth there for quite a long time. Yes, sir.
In 2003, I thought there should have been a regime change in Iran, but no one knows me, so it doesn't matter. And instead, we followed the false premise of the WMD. So I hope you'll consider that.
Yeah, I spent 14 months in Iraq looking for that and trying not to get blown up. And yeah, and besides, the regime, we're not good at regime change. If the local country does not want to change it, we're not going to earn it for them, no matter how much force we apply.
Well, there's supposedly it's almost like 80% support inside Iran for it.
And I don't mind us helping and supporting them and helping them, but they have to fight for their own country.
That's right.
America can't do it for them.
That's
I'm
right.
totally with you. My question is about the deficit. Are you concerned at all?
It is our biggest vulnerability right now. When we have the Chinese and the Japanese and other countries owning our debt, they can influence our future and our decisions. But the problem, we have an addiction problem in Washington.
Yes.
We love to spend somebody else's money.
Yes.
And I'll tell you, we have to cut the size and the breadth of the federal government. When in Georgia, when the governor tells me, hey, John, department heads, our budget's gonna be tight. I need you to cut 10% of your budget. We cut 10% of our budget. Especially when you have less than 4% unemployment rate. Guys, we can't afford the size of our federal. And so what we ought to look at, the first question we ought to look when a new program gets, in Washington, ask the question, can the state do this better? And then cut a check and send a block grant to the state for the state to deliver that service. Very few organizations of this complexity work well from a central. The central economies are very difficult to manage. We know, we've seen every model. But the federal government is what I call the self-licking ice cream cone. My God, we had folks that were working for months in their pajamas in their basements, never left their home, and were getting a full salary. All those offices in Washington, D.C. were empty, and we were running air conditioning and electricity in them. Empty. Because everybody was working from home. If nobody misses you for months, probably we don't need to be paying that salary. And there's plenty of work here in Georgia. Come to Georgia and get a job.
Because otherwise, soon our entire budget is going to go paying interest.
We can't afford it now. It is getting in the way of our major infrastructure. The problem is that there's an addiction problem to the tax dollar. And we have to put some, and it's going to be hard. We're going to have to look at discretionary, but we also got to look at non-discretionary programs. Providing free health care to every able-bodied illegal alien in this country. It's absurd.
Yes.
And the problem is that when people don't have, skin in the game, and I saw this as a policeman. We don't have an access to a healthcare problem because everybody can just roll into the emergency room and get care when they're hurt, which is the most expensive, most inefficient way of getting healthcare. And guess what? We all pay it. You in the local community, your county taxes. Do you know how much money? You know that from insurance. You pay in premium tax for for homeowners, health, auto insurance. You're paying a tax. Half of the tax gets sent to Clark Athens, to every county and every city in Georgia. Let me look at how much, because I asked Brandon to look it up. Athens, Clark County gets a check from our office for $11,297,000 a year. And guess what? There's no strings attached to that. And so the question ought to be,
Where's it going?
where's it going?
That's exactly right.
And so I can't tell that insurance, I can't tell, they don't allow me to tell, but I can recommend, and I can come to communities like this and ask you, I would want your county government to use that money to improve your fire department, to make you more risk, to have more, better fire, pressurized water for your fire hydrants, more fire stations, so then your property insurance rates go down. It's about resiliency, building resilience. That money was supposed to be used to improve the safety of your community. But the problem is that they don't even tell you
That's right.
what the insurance premium tax is for. And so when there's no strings attached, it gets used for whatever crazy program it gets for. And so, but this is your money. This is not my money. This is your money that you pay for every insurance policy that you bought. And our local government needs to answer, hey, how are you using it? We know that school taxes, most people have no idea how much school taxes are. They're one of the most expensive parts of government. And when we have, being the chief of police in Doraville, when you have a 58% graduation rate, I used to call that the HOB lane to prison. Because when a kid doesn't graduate from high school, within 2 to 3 years, they're going to state prison. And as a national security, as a military man, how can we afford to put the young men and women in their most productive years of their life and warehouse them in a state prison? And that's not good for our nation. It's an investment that we made on these young people. And so we need to come up with, and so when the young man was talking about reading programs, it starts with reading. And if you don't, I used to have to fight against the school board and the cab to let my police officers go and read. Remember, I had police officers from all over that spoke multiple languages, and having to show a good positive role model to kids in their 3rd and 4th grade was incredibly important. Why? Because I was working on the future crime rate. So they had a positive role model. But when you have to fight the school system to get into the school to read, you got some fundamental problems in your society. And I hope you don't have that problem here in Athens, but I suspect you might. But, yes, sir.
Yeah, what's your position on homeschooling and vouchers and, we're talking about the educational system. Why do the young people believe what they believe? Well, there's some teachers that are not doing a job. They're just propagandizing in the classroom, so we got a big problem there.
I will tell you that I am a big fan, because in Mexico, any family can afford, when families have to choose between taking that extra vacation, or sending your kid to a private school, they invest in the kid's education. And they send them, because the Mexican schools, many of them are mediocre. And so you send them to private school. Even people who are very modest means. We don't have that opportunity in Georgia. And so the ability to, we ought to not be rewarding failing schools. How much, what the young man said, $30,000? I will tell you, I know more about the CAB. They had 11 assistant superintendents in the CAB County. Mother of God, everybody was assistant superintendent. In their classroom, that's just absurd. $30,000 per student. Well, we've been getting a heck of a lot more better, and it's about outcomes. And we ought to, as voters, demand that the performance, the evaluation of the superintendent ought to be on reading comprehension and graduation rates. And if you don't meet the needs of maybe you ought to have a conversation about removing somebody, giving somebody this focus on outcomes. But I come from a world of accountability. In the Army, the Army and the Marine Corps are very funny, organizations. The Marine, a good friend of mine was a Marine, says there's no bad Marine regiments. There's just bad regimental commanders. And so when we want to change, when you have a failing organization, you replace the leadership.
Amen.
We've lost that in the civilian world. And we ought to be about accountability. We ought to be measuring outcomes. And if we fail to do that, then we throwing more money. I mean, the homeless problem is incredible. People think that, oh, we invested $5 billion into the homeless. What is your outcome? Pouring money into a failing program that gives a bunch of non-government organizations getting more and more money without measuring how many people you were able to break the cycle of addiction, mental health, and housing. The housing is the easy part. The housing is the easy part. It's the mental health and the drug addiction. The fact that we have veterans today, that tells you that our VA system is totally broken. We should not, I'll tell you, to me it's shameful that we have a situation where our veterans are having to wait 2 years for a mental health appointment. And that's what we have 22 veterans a day committing suicide. And that's unacceptable.
Yes.
But John Ossoff measures, he got to rename the VA hospital in Decatur.
Yeah.
He's successful. He sent a strongly worded letter to the post office because they can't deliver our mail. Well, maybe we ought to look at, if the post office can't deliver the mail, maybe we ought to privatize it.
Yeah.
Amazon has no problem getting that package of my wife's to my house 2-3 times a day sometimes. Don't probably film the open my wife if I see this, but. And so we ought to measure outcomes. And if we have a problem measuring outcomes, we're probably not doing the right thing. And so you have to do that every day. Why should the government? And so it's just a clear approach that I like to bring to. Any other question? One last question, because I know you start, if you fall off your chair and you hurt yourself, then I don't think workers' comp will cover you. Any other thoughts, questions? Thank you all so much for the opportunity to come and chat with y'all. I ask you to go to votejohnking.com, take a look at what the things that I want to change and what the things that I want to work on. And don't be shy about sending us recommendations, things that I need to be paying attention to. Keep up. We're going to be traveling around the state, making our case. But I want to listen too, because I tell you, more folks need to get in front of folks. And you make me a better communicator. And I really appreciate the opportunity to come and chat with you all and take your questions, because you make me a better campaigner. Thank you all so much. Appreciate it.